Welcome to another Mod with me, where we will cultivate a creative connection to the soft and feminine world of the Ember and Aura Tarot. Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today we're going to be trimming and edging the Ember and Aura Tarot. So it will probably be no surprise to anybody who watches my channel or my other deck mods that this deck is ending up on my cutting board. Now, it is an absolutely beautifully pink gilded, which you don't often see, gorgeous pink gilded deck. However, like all gilding, I'm finding it to be very sharp and very hard on my hands. Now, the cardstock on this deck is wonderful. I really like the cardstock. It's matte, it's got a great feel to it, and it has, when you overhand it, it has a wonderful sound to it. Can you hear that? I love that sound. But it's because it's a larger tarot deck, so it is closer to oracle size than it is a traditional tarot, which would be a little bit more narrow. So it's kind of hard for me to get my hands around this deck. But I completely love the artwork. I love the soft feminine vibe of it. I'm not so wild about all of the suns, which I think are the knights, but you know, it can't always be perfect. But for the most part, like, oh, look how beautiful. I love the pippish nature of a lot of the cards, and I think it's a really gorgeous deck. However, the gilding is kind of starting to kill my hands. And to be perfectly honest with you, this deck, we are 4 days into our working together this week, and I'm already just done with the gilding. Let's go ahead and jump into this mod. So I do have to say that I'm not wild about the white on the back either. This is the Awakening edition of this particular deck. And the Awakening edition has the extra card, the Awakening card, which again is not one that really does a whole lot for me. I'm not real big on extra cards in decks. It's very few decks that have an extra card that I actually connect with the extra card, because the tarot in itself is a set and balanced system, and I don't necessarily know that it always needs extra cards, but they're great for modifications because it allows you to do some practice work with it. The second edition, or I shouldn't say the second edition, the Awakening edition has the white borders on the back, which is not my favorite, so that was kind of another reason why I was like, I'm okay with trimming it, because I can take that off. And as I said, it has the pink metal type gilding. I don't know what it's really called, but I think that once I get that off, the deck is going to be a little bit smaller and a little bit easier for me to handle as well, because as it is, it's a little bit difficult for me to shuffle, because it's hard to get, I have small hands too, so this is just me, but it's hard for me to get my hands around the deck to actually shuffle it. It overhands much nicer, but again, that gilding is just, it's hurting my hands. And we didn't even make it a week with each other before I decided that this just needed to happen. So what we're going to do is our usual process of I'm going to trim this deck down one side at a time, all of the cards at once, to ensure that I get the straightest, hopefully most cohesive trim that is possible in trimming by hand. And then hopefully that will make the deck still shuffle beautifully for me. So the only thing that really concerns me is that I do really want to keep the titles on the bottom of the cards, because there are some of them that are particularly, I think, in the quartz that I might struggle with a little bit. Look at that Hermit. Isn't she gorgeous? Love that Hermit card. And I think they look nice. I like the font. I think it's very well done. So I want to go ahead and keep it. But I just need to double check that when I trim these, because I'm thinking I can trim it just to the back, which will take the white border off the back and will also take all the gilding off the side. And I am hoping that I can trim that and that we will be able to retain that title. So I'm just going to do... I always play this game of what's the best way to do this? So what I want to do is measure these up. Although I'm kind of, you know, I'm repeating the same process for the most part. Every mod is just a little bit different. So by going through this process, I'm seeing kind of what's unique about this deck. So if I trim that white border off the top, I'm gonna be left with the title on the bottom, which is great. A lot of the cards have a lot of white space on them, which I do really like, but some of them have the white border on the front, and that does match, it looks like, the border on the back. So for this particular deck, we should be able to just go ahead and trim using the back of the deck as our guide. I am going to go through first and just make sure that all the cards are upright, because I want to make sure that I'm always trimming the same side in the same way on every card. Okay, so we are all good there. Generally, when I do a mod like this, I would do the title area last, but because that is the area of most concern for me, I'm actually going to start with that. And what I'm hoping is that I can use this is the Extra Awakening card, to provide my my measurements, and that way I can be using the front of the deck to trim. So I hope that makes sense. I'm actually going to measure according to the back using this card, but I'm going to cut from the front because I want to make sure that I am seeing things and I'm not cutting anything off that I want to really keep. I don't often recommend modding or trimming a deck from the back anyway, it's particularly unless you're not particular about what you take off the front. So I'm going to use my little handy triangle that I've been working with in my last few mods just to help me keep things lined up properly. So it looks like the deck is, of course, just shy of 5 inches. Never on a line, never on a line. So I'm going to use the back of this card and my trusty ruler to make sure I am getting all of the back off, because you know, I don't want any of that white border to remain. And I apologize for my beat up hands, but we've been doing some stuff around the house, and you know what, if I waited till everything looked perfect to make videos, you know, my hands, my nails, whatever, I wouldn't make videos near as often. So I've decided not to worry about it. It is what it is. You guys aren't interested in seeing my hands anyway. You want to see what I'm making. I hope. That's the hope anyway. Okay, so I've got that taped on there, and I'm going to kind of just run some along the corners here to try and keep things in place. I do want to make sure that my washi doesn't impede my card in any way. And let's make sure that my card sits up against there, and always double checking just to make sure that things are good. I do want to make sure I'm cutting the bottom of this because there can be variations in printing between your top and bottom. Hopefully that is lined up properly. It looks straight. Let's see how straight it actually is. So I got just a tiny bit off of the bottom there. And I took that gilding with it, and you can see I got it all off the bottom there. And hopefully that text is in the same spot in every card. That's the hope. And there we go. And you can see it's really close. And that one cut even more off the bottom. And I feel like my trimmer is not straight. Yeah, I didn't bring my blade down straight, so there we go. So I'm going to finish this side up and we'll come back and take a look. Okay, so I've got all of the bottoms cut off, so that took off that white border on the bottom. Also took off the gilding, which was what I was after ultimately, and I was able to keep the titles on the bottom, so that ended up working out really well, I think. And I think it's going to be really cute when it's done. And I could still go ahead and take those titles off at some point if I wanted to, but I think it's going to be fine with them on there. So what I'm going to do is basically repeat the process, and I'm going to work from the top this time. Okay, so I'm going to finish cutting the tops off of these, and then we'll come back and take a look. Okay, so I've got the top and the bottom cut off of this deck, and I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process and cut both the sides. Again, I'm using the back as my measurement, and I'm basically cutting just the white border off. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that up and get the rest of the gilding off of here. Then I will go ahead and corner around it, and then we'll come back and talk about color. Okay, so I've gotten the entire deck trimmed down and the corners all rounded. I did end up using the large corner rounder, and what I found was that using the large corner rounder, which I often find when I round decks with it, is that it makes it a little bit softer. And now that I've trimmed the borders off of these, they feel a little bit more intimate and a little bit softer, and I think that that's really cool, and I'm really kind of glad that I decided to go ahead and go with trimming it all down and with the large corner rounder. So now what I'm going to do is actually edge the deck just to kind of finish it off. However, this deck does have a lot of white in the cards, and I think leaving it white would be just fine. I don't think that you necessarily need to edge the deck in order to, you know, finish this one off because of the amount of white on the front of the deck. But I'd really like to go ahead and try to match the back of the cards because it's just fun. It makes it a little bit more unique. And I've been kind of playing around with some different markers. I always kind of try to go to marker first if I can because it's the easiest to use. It's the quickest, it goes on the fastest, and I try to use it when I can. And you can see I pulled a bunch of different colors of pinks and purples, but I just didn't feel that any of them really matched this soft kind of mauve tone that's picking up in the back. And then I got out my distressed ink, my Victorian Velvet, and I think that that's probably going to be what I'm going to use because it has that that nice mauve-y color. And I could do, you know, multi-tone on this deck for sure. There's definitely some multi-tone colors in the back. And we definitely have, you know, a variety of pastel colors within the deck itself. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and go with the solid color. I might do more later on, but we'll see. To start with, what I'm going to do is move all this stuff out of the way. And I'm going to go ahead and just edge the deck as I normally would. So how I use a distressed ink is basically just to take it and I'm going to run it along the edge. For the most part, distressed ink usually doesn't run too bad, and it usually stays in place where you want it. But again, a lot of that depends on the cardstock. I always wipe the excess off. And it doesn't look like it bled too bad on the front. Again, depends on the cardstock, and it really depends on you know, if you've cut into your cardstock, now you're cutting into a raw edge. And it's really hard to tell with just one, but I think that's going to be a really close match. So I'm going to go ahead and edge the deck. Maybe we'll see if I get about halfway through, we'll check back in. Okay, so I've gotten a few of the cards done, and I just wanted to show you real quick because I am starting to lose the light here, so I'm probably going to finish this up this evening. And I just wanted to show you what it looked like with this new color. Let's just pull a section of them. So I think the color match is really beautiful. It's going to need 2 coats for sure because I can see the white coming through, but oh, look how pretty. I think it works really well with the back. It's like an almost perfect color match for this darker mauve color. So I'm going to go ahead and finish edging the deck. I am going to end up needing to do 2 coats on this, so that will be something that I will work on throughout the evening. So we'll probably come back here. It'll be tomorrow for me, but just a moment for you, and take a look at the finished version. So I finished up the entire deck, and as I said, it's been a day for me, but just a moment for you. I think that the color came out really pretty. Once it dried, it filled in really nicely. I did do 2 coats, and it actually ended up matching the backs really well. Let me bring it in so you can see here. Look how pretty. Isn't that a great match? Like, look. So I really, really like the color that it came out. And in fact, I like the color. I'm not a fan of gilding anyway, but I like the color better than that kind of hot pink gilding that it had. I think that this color actually matches much better. I did get, and you can see here if I bring it in close, I did get some bleeding, and this was after I did the second coat. And I think part of that is because my stamp started getting really worn down. And when your stamp starts getting really grooved and beat up like that, it really does kind of tend to fold over the top of the cards, and you tend to get that bleeding. But I actually don't mind it. It's very, very minuscule, and I think it actually works with this deck because there is so much pink in this deck that I think that the little bit of mauve bleeding that I'm getting is really works fine with this deck. As you can see, like, it matches really well. So while generally that would really bug the crap out of me, especially on a deck that has so much white space, because of the colors in this deck and because of the nature of the deck and the fact that there are some bits of color that run around, let's see if I can find it here. There's like little hints, little smudges of color on this deck anyway, and so I think it kind of works because of that. You can see them, like there's another little one there. That's on the card design, not what I added to it. So I think it works just fine, but let's go ahead and take a look at the deck now that I've completely trimmed it down. It didn't really change the design of the deck any. I kept the titles. I just took off that excess border and I rounded it with the large corner rounder. And I think it actually made the images appear like even more closer in. They're a bit more intimate, I guess you could say. And I love the super rounded corners. I think it makes it look really soft. And that for this particular deck just really, really works. So I'm really pleased with the way it came out. I'm really pleased with the color. It's so much better than the gilding that it had. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with gilding. I just don't particularly like gilding. That's a personal preference. But now the backs are also completely borderless, which is, I think, how the previous edition is. I think the white border is a new thing on this new Awakening edition. But let's just give it a shuffle and see how it goes. I can already tell you that just making it that little bit smaller. So I took, like, what did I say, 1/4 of an inch off all sides. Even just making it that much smaller means I can get my hands around it. And it still shuffles wonderfully. I mean, it is a new deck, so it's still a little bit stiff, and I'm sure it will break in more. But it still shuffles wonderfully, and I really like that color on the sides. I think it really just makes the deck look really nice and finished. So it rifle shuffles and bridges. Well, it still overhand shuffles beautifully. Still getting that nice sound. I love that sound. So let's just pull a few cards so we can see what they look like. And again, like I said, I did get a little bit of bleeding, and you can definitely see it on the cards that are a bit more white. But overall, I think that it works for it, and I'm okay with it. And again, like I said, that's really because my ink pad got, like, look at that. I kind of destroyed it, and I think what happened was that on the second coat, I think I was pressing too hard, and you can see where I wore grooves into my ink pad. I mean, I always wear grooves into my ink pad, but generally not with one deck. I mean, generally it takes me edging a deck two or three different decks before my ink pads start to look like this. So I think what was happening was I was watching YouTube as I was doing this, and I think I wasn't really paying very close attention, and I was digging the ink pad into the card too hard, and I think that's why I got so much bleeding, because I was pressing it in there really hard, and probably too hard, and that's what created the grooves in my ink pad and also the little bit of bleeding. But overall, I'm really pleased with the way that it came out. I think it looks beautiful. It's so much easier for me to handle now. And I've removed that gilding that just, it bothers my hands. And again, that's totally just perfect personal preference. There are lots of people who absolutely love gilded decks. It's just not my favorite. So I like to just usually take the gilding off. There are very few decks in my collection that still have their original gilding. And the ones that do are really the ones that were very, very well done and usually don't have that sort of sharp metallic gilding. But anyway, this one I'm very pleased with the way that it came out. I think it looks wonderful, and I'm really, really happy with the smaller size. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to use. I think this deck would look amazing pocket size. I hope that the creator, Jamie Richardson, at some point, I would love a pocket size version, like playing card size of this deck. That would be awesome. So thank you so much for joining me for this mod with me. You will find the links for the deck and products that I've used in this video in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this process and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.